Everybody ready? We'll call to order the regular meeting of May 8, 2014, the Woodland Park Planning Commission, and first item on the agenda is the roll call.
Thank you. DeVoe?
Here.
Watson?
Here.
Mattingly? Mella?
Here.
Probst?
Here.
Rollinger?
Present.
Schrader? Stannard?
Here.
And Vogel.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have 7 members present this evening.
If all of those in the audience would like to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Chair, on your desk this evening are a few red lines or edits to the first page of the minutes. Other than those edits, we would recommend that you approve them as edited.
Oh, these. Has everybody had a chance to look at the edit to it, Mr. Rollinger?
The edit to the
Do you
minutes.
have one of these? The red
Yeah.
one?
Just a single page,
Single
there's a
page.
red line.
Who made the edits? You guys did? Based on
I-
Mr. Kopp.
I did. I was preparing the packet for council and reviewed that paragraph just yesterday, and felt that it needed to be clarified that it wasn't the lot lines that he was particularly trying to clean up. It's not a lot line vacation. It was more so that he needed to clean up that for sale or potential development, which is what was stated in the hearing too. So just clarifying a couple of details in the minutes.
Everybody okay with it?
Yes.
Need a motion?
I have a question. Not about the red line's fine. The last page, under Land Use and Growth Action 1.4.2, where we talk about, I beg your pardon, 1.4.1, annexation plan. Although the councilman wasn't at the table, and maybe that's why it's not in here, he asked a question as to whether a certain portion of the city could be annexed. He referred to a friend's question, and I don't see a reference to that in here. And is it not in here because he wasn't at the table?
No. It can be added to
No.
the
Well,
minutes.
if you think it should be in there, that's fine. And if it's irrelevant, then don't put it in.
Yeah. Kind of thought it wasn't all that relevant as far as an annexation plan.
Okay,
Bring us up to date.
thank you.
What councilman did what?
It was John who was sitting.
Mr. Schaefer sat there and asked a question about annexing something on the north end of town,
Sunnywood.
and the answer was no. And I didn't know whether, well, whatever. Do whatever you wish.
Okay.
It's good as is.
They did.
Everybody okay with that?
Move to accept with revisions as noted.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same side. Carried.
Thank you.
under request and/or public hearings. We have before us tonight ordinance number 1216, Series 2014, an ordinance amending Chapter 18.09 of the Woodland Park Municipal Code to allow as permit, okay, let's scratch here, to allow up to 2 dwelling units within the same structure as a permitted use in the neighborhood commercial community commercial heavy service central business district and fix the teeth and heavy service commercial light industry zone districts.
Thank you. This is a legislative item, and during the Main Street community assessment that was held at the end of March, 1st of April, a local developer and real estate broker who has recently gone through our conditional use process for a residential unit in a commercial zone made the suggestion that we should look at making 1 or 2 units in a commercial zone a permitted use in our table of uses, our matrix. And so the city manager and the mayor picked up on that suggestion, and in the last month or so I have been working with the city attorney to draft this legislation. And we believe that it will have several benefits. It will reduce the time with which we process a request. This would, as a permitted use, be a simple zoning development permit application versus the conditional use application. So it will reduce the time from a week-long review to a 90-day review, which is what it takes to go through the conditional use process. Second benefit is that it is significantly more affordable to go that route. Our ZDP cost is $102. The conditional use permit is $428 or $48 plus publication costs. So we believe that with this streamlined and less expensive process, it should encourage more mixed-use buildings in our commercial areas. And if we have more residential use in the commercial areas, then people will be residing where they can shop, potentially where they live, and hopefully drive less, and are able to be a more walkable environment. So the permitted use process reduces staff time and applicants' cost, which we believe is without compromising the integrity of the surrounding uses. The one disadvantage is that with the conditional use, the council and the planning commission reviews potentially additional conditions special to that use that can be added to that zone request beyond what we typically have in our typical zoning routine conditions. However, we have found that there are very few needs to mitigate impacts with residential in the commercial zone. In fact, it's more the commercial uses that impact the residential. So people who are moving into a mixed-use building are well aware that they're sharing their space with offices or retail or restaurants or other uses. And we are seeing more and more of this. It's called new urbanism for that's really old urbanism, where the shopkeeper oftentimes lived above the store that they tended or owned or managed. And 107 Sundial is an example of the recent conditional use permit that came forward. What I'd like to talk about next is the meat or heart of this ordinance, which is the matrix of permitted uses in the ordinance. And at first, we were looking to change the single-family and the two-family, but after our hearing last Thursday, our city attorney and I felt that the better approach is to segregate or add a specific line to our residential dwelling units, section N, that addresses this specifically. So that becomes number 7 on the matrix, which states that up to 2 dwelling units within a single structure in a commercial zone, and you go across the table and you will see that there are Ps for permitted in all the commercially zoned areas. So that would designate or signify that they apply through a zoning development permit and be able to conduct a remodel if necessary for a structure to create a habitable space or 2 habitable space within a single unit. We did have a conditional use that came through recently or a few years ago that was with the State Farm office, where the State Farm owner modified a section of that business between Midland Avenue and Highway 24 and installed or remodeled it with an apartment. So they live and work in the same building. So as a result, just stepping through the 7 different categories here, single family, we proposed removing those conditional uses from the single family. Number 2, what becomes number 2 right now, this single family requiring a subdivision was added primarily because we had an instance off of Highway 67 and Columbine Avenue where there was a townhome plat that was simply restructured or replatted into single-family lots. And they could do that as a permitted use, but we added conditional use to that scenario so that they could come forward and we could require things like street trees or other types of design implications. So that's where number 2 came from. Number 3, clustered development, was also added to our code not too long ago, and that was to allow in the urban residential and suburban residential to have a tighter, more dense development in those single-family zoned areas, but not allow for an increase in the number of units. But what that does is reduce the infrastructure and gives a different type of development to a particular neighborhood that might be appropriate in. Number 4 is 2-family, and you can see that we have crossed out the conditional use required there, because now if you have a conditional use or you have a up to 2 units in commercial, then you go through the permitted use process. And it is still permitted in multifamily, urban, multifamily, suburban, and then a conditional use for mobile home park. Number 5, we changed from 2 to 4 to 3 to 4 attached dwelling units. And the difference between number 5 and number 6, which starts at 5 or more, is that the 3 to 4 is not allowed in service commercial. However, in 5 or more units, so an apartment complex could be allowed in service commercial, but with a conditional use permit. And then lastly is number 7. which is our new addition to this table that we're specifically talking about tonight. So I wanted to take a little time to explain all those various categories and how they relate to the residential dwelling unit section of our use matrix. So moving on to the red-lined or the blue lines. The blue lines were the changes that the city attorney made earlier this week. The red are things that she and I discussed as a result. And so the title of this ordinance is slightly changed so that the municipal code will allow up to 2 dwelling units within the same structure as a permitted use. Ms. Smith added a couple of whereases so that we could further refine and justify the actions of this legislation and provide some examples, like an apartment over or below a commercial use, all within the same structure, a duplex, or below a commercial use, all within the same structure, or townhomes. Moving on to the next whereas, there are just a few tweaks to this that reflect our heading while keeping the impacts to the commercial neighborhoods minimal. And then the whereas recital that deals with the comprehensive plan goals, we've added a little bit of language or tweak. And the last whereas to also make it consistent with the language of up to 2 dwelling units within the same structure. Then the next section moves on to the core part, which I've just discussed, explained, for the use matrix. And then the last section is the passage and sign-off, which has not changed. So with that review and overall, I did add 3 photographs here of recent facilities that we have had switch to a residential use. One little small home at 116 North Center Street. This structure had a fire on New Year's Eve, and the owner, Amir Safian, decided that he would like to have more opportunity to rent it as a residence, and so he did complete his remodel and then was able to rent this right away and has very little impact to this commercial area. On 404 North Highway 67, this is a building owned by Norm Steen, and he too has asked for the conditional use for residential, and I'm not sure if he's been able to lease it yet or not. I know he did have some commercial interest right away after he had gone through the zoning, but I'm not sure that that seemed to have fallen through. And then lastly is a photograph of the State Farm building when it was under sale. So we would recommend to approve this ordinance 1216 as amended. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sally, maybe I was half asleep. Could you tell me the negatives again?
The only negative that I can foresee is that there's not a public hearing and a process where extra conditions or added conditions could be placed on these applications, but we find that a residential use does not bring impacts to the area. I mean, we'll be reviewing it for meeting the codes for parking and other circumstances. So We just don't see that there's a need to add conditions.
Thank you.
So it's that categorical, it's not just that there are fewer that council provides, that in fact there's none. It just doesn't happen. That's because the way this is worded, the experience has been that there are none. So in your recollection, you don't recall any, so there would be no loss with respect to oversight by council to condition
Right.
a request.
Yes. A lot of times, we may add a condition about backflow prevention devices, but that's a standard requirement.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
And you do address parking in the zoning, so
We do. Yeah, we always look at what their parking arrangement is.
What is the difference between a two-family on item 4 and up to 2 dwelling units within a single structure in a commercial zone on item 7?
Two-family in item 4 allows for duplexes to be in the multifamily codes. Item 7 deals specifically with just the commercial area.
And a duplex wouldn't be allowed.
A duplex could be allowed, yes, in the commercial zone, but this is segregating the commercial versus the residential for two-family. We felt that differential should be applied to the matrix.
And let me give you just a hypothetical that might put this into something more in reality. The building I have my business in right now, it's in a commercial area. It's a log building. Could be residential. It's got everything a residential would have to have, bathrooms, everything like that.
It could.
So it wouldn't have to do anything. It wouldn't be required because it's a permitted use in that spot. That you could turn that into the owner could turn that into a residential rental.
They could. They would come in and fill out a zoning development permit for their change in use, and we would review it according to the zoning regulations.
Do you see any concern that you would have where we may have an abundance of storefronts downtown where people would begin using those as a rental unit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Turn that into a place of residence?
You know, they may, but typically the downtown highway frontage, the highest and best use is going to be
Yeah.
a commercial use, not a residential
I think
use.
the monetary would push it away from that tendency, I think.
What would?
The monetary, the economics for the owner, the economics would redound to keeping it in a retail capacity versus.
I've just seen stranger things happen. Somebody's desperate for an income, they're about to lose something on foreclosure, and now we got, how many people can live in that building?
Up
How many?
up to 5 unrelated people can live in a, and there's no maximum on the related people. You know, you could have a family of 10
Okay.
living in a unit.
All I'm saying is that I wish there was some safeguard that the planning commission or the planning department would have to not have that happen.
I
The other thing, how many of those are there? I mean, the typical structure would be more like Bucks on Main Street, which wouldn't qualify in turning that into somewhere to live. So the question is, what in the housing stock on Main Street, what the percentage is? And I'm not asking for an answer
Yeah.
now, but it seems to me it would be in a relatively low order of magnitude.
Yeah, I know of 2 apartments on Main Street right now. The State Farm,
Right.
and there's one above the Seven Arrows gallery that has been there for many, many years.
He
Grandfather.
rents that out.
He does.
You could take a unit like Bucks, good point, turn that into a 2-unit dwelling and have as many people in there as you wanted to. Do you have any, all I'm saying is from a planning department standpoint, I would feel, not so much the planning commission, but planning department, that you have something in your quiver of arrows that gives you some control over something like that would happen in a really terrible economy, or in desperation of a landowner trying to save a building.
John, I agree, but right now rentals are at a premium because we don't have any rentals, for the Bible college, and I could foresee maybe some of that happening.
If we had a bad economy, would you rather that building be empty?
Yes,
You would.
rather than have 20 people living in it. Yeah, any day of the week. I can relate to some places in big cities where they have 20 people living in them.
I've got an unrelated question if are we done with that one?
I just wonder, is there anything you can think of that we could give you something in there that gives you the ability to do that?
We've recently been working on a number of amendments, and the more restrictive we become, the harder they are to administer. So it's easier to administer something that has a little more flexibility in it, and then you can react to those cases, those anomalies or unique cases. But I don't foresee that happening. I think the market is not going to go there.
That's the key, I think, is that the cost would be prohibitive to take bucks and turn it into something that would accommodate 20 people. But
2 units.
that being said, I'm just curious why, on number 7, the up to 2, what modeling, I mean, why not 4 or 3, or what modeling was chosen to kind of limit it to that? What was the
Well,
thinking?
We thought that 1 was almost too few, and 2 seemed to be about right, because once you start getting into 3, then we also have water tap issues. So I think we were comfortable with having it a use by right to come through as permitted for 2.
And do you see an additional change downstream from this being modified, or do you see this as relatively intact or permanent, short-term at least?
Definitely for the short term intact. We always like to try to anticipate the implementation of aspects of these things, but as you get into real life circumstances, other issues may crop up, and you'll be back tweaking it.
Well, I like this. It's an adjustment based on real circumstances that have arisen, so being able to accommodate that. I know relative to the affordable housing issue, if you ask people who are developers who try to put together plans in the past to make things work, the inhibitions have often been the administrative and the financial costs on a per unit basis that don't make it economically viable for the people who are taking the risks. So anything we can do across that spectrum to mitigate the impact to the people who are assuming the financial risks, I think would be something we should support.
Certainly adds additional options for property owners.
Right.
Any other questions? Mr. Rollinger?
If we go permitted, the process is administrative, handled by staff,
Correct.
and that eliminates the public hearing process. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Just as there are no permitted process, in the permitted scenario of a new store, or a new office, or a new restaurant, there's no notification, no public hearing if you're in the central business district.
So it's possible that an affected resident, or business for that matter, will not have the opportunity, as we do during the public hearing, to express his or her concerns, questions, et cetera.
You're using the term affected. So I would
Adjacent
ask,
landowner.
how do you feel a property owner would be affected by a residence next
Well,
to their business?
You know, we've done, I believe, 5 of these in the time that I've been here, and in at least 2 of those cases, folks who either lived or worked around the subject properties had questions or concerns. So all I'm saying is that if you're going to take this move, those people don't have a chance to sit out here, well, sign up, sit out here, and then come up and ask questions.
Right.
Do they?
No, they do not.
Okay.
The one case that we did have quite a bit of concern was the Safian. I have since talked
Right.
with the folks who were concerned, and they have no issues at this point. They were perceived fears that there were going to be problems, which did not turn out to be problems.
So you're not concerned then that a resident or a business owner will not have the opportunity
The surrounding property owners.
to come up?
Nope.
It's a good question. Can you think of an instance or an issue that this might arise where someone would be concerned about? Are you thinking of changes in volume or density, or
Yeah, it could be traffic, it could be noise, it could be any parking, it could be any concern.
Well, the example on Center Street, that property,
With the
with
concerns?
with
Dogs.
the massage or whatever, the place next door, where they were
Now they have a
concerned
grooming unit.
about what might go in there and noise, and it didn't turn out that way. It's very quiet, but I don't know that their concerns were illegitimate. I mean, we approved it anyhow, but I think that's an example that I've seen
I
since we've been here.
That's one. And I think, well, here at Commission, we've seen one example where clearly a developer did not have the best interest in mind of specific residents. And I've had personal experience with developers that I think I want to watch pretty carefully. Not builders, developers.
Well, the trend is moving toward mixed use with typically the retail or the commercial uses on the street level, lower level, and then apartments or dwelling units above.
And as you know, I'm totally supportive of infill. Totally. I mean, no question, it's the right thing to do.
You're just talking process.
But I'm talking process, exactly.
Well, I think it takes away somebody's right to come and voice a concern.
But by that
Because we hear
argument,
the concerns.
by that argument, you would argue for everything to be conditional use.
Not necessarily, but when you're mixing commercial and residential together. I mean, I think the people had the one on or whatever, the Center Street, whatever it is, it was a legitimate concern with her business.
Because it was dog grooming.
No, it wasn't
the old
dog grooming, it was
the
if-
old Teller County Waste.
It was people grooming.
Oh, got
Not so much people, but if the
Very good,
tenants, if the tenants had a dog.
Right.
But the
You know,
dog
it would-
groomer moved in just down the street.
Yeah, 2 doors down now.
And there was no requirement for them
Nope.
to,
Process-wise.
I mean,
But that's
that could
commercial
have certainly
encroaching on
caused more
Residential.
noise for the business than.
This is residential, potentially encroaching.
On commercial.
Right.
Yeah, the spa place, her massage room was right next to that area where potentially they could have had a dog. And the landlord flat refused to prohibit dogs.
And there are codes in place
Right,
for
that's what I was gonna
noise
say.
and
Yeah.
those sorts of things.
I
So,
mean, these things all intersect and support
do.
one another from a policy and perspective. I guess, to me, it's a question of balance and kind of the degree of likelihood of something coming up. The way it is now could be arguably stated as overkill in terms of requiring a conditional use for this change. And that's why I like limiting it to 2. And my question about future was just that, will it someday move to 4? And is there an anticipated or kind of a natural propensity from a policy evolution perspective that these things become more administrative and less oversight from this body as well as council?
no, it is very important that there is a review process for a new apartment complex or even 4 units. The townhomes that went in next to the library, that there are 6 units there. They would go through a conditional use permit, as they did back in the early 2000s.
And that's the reason I asked, and that's the response I was hoping for, is that at this level of magnitude and this level of potential impact, I tend to be comfortable with allowing it to be a permitted use, because I think on balance the frequency of problems would be less likely just based on the relative low magnitude and relative low impact. Whereas if you increase that administratively, and you don't see that happening downstream,
No.
then I think that then you do have a problem on your hands. Because you're going to get, the larger, the more permitted is, the greater the impact potential.
Right,
So it's a discretionary decision.
right.
One of the things that I could see a change is just in Central Business District. The density affects everything in that area, such as that one parlor that was concerned that their windows were open and the sound from the kids would bother her and that. A neighborhood commercial, community commercial, heavy, I don't see a problem. But where you get business after business after business with 0 or no lot lines, then I think that there would be more of an opportunity to, perhaps we should have more of an opportunity to review that because of the density. But all the rest of them, I don't have a problem with. Just a thought.
I would surmise that the highway creates more noise and issues than 1 or 2 units in the downtown core. This is a public hearing, so
No, we haven't opened the public
Oh.
hearing yet.
public comment.
We're still under
I'm
planning
sorry.
commission asking questions of staff and applicant,
Yes.
I think.
I think she's done with
John's
us
on his
asking
way.
questions.
Yeah, she was trying to be polite. That was your mistake, Sally.
Okay, so I will, if there are no more questions for the applicant at this point, we shall move on and open the meeting for public comment.
Thank you.
Okay. Is anybody signed up? Would you like to come to the podium and address the planning commission? Mr. Councilman?
My name is John Schaefer, and I reside at 425 Oxford Lane here in Woodland Park. I was surprised by this topic. A bit of a preamble. It's my understanding that mixed-use units are only permitted today in the DDA overlay. Correct?
Yes, I can answer that. As a permitted use, they are the only allowance for both commercial and residential to be in the same building. And all the uses within the Woodland Station overlay are a permitted use.
So we do not currently have a mixed-use ordinance. So my question to Sally, really, and to the commission is, does this then substitute for not having a mixed-use ordinance? Does it allow, it's a first step in that direction, and do you intend to develop and have approved a mixed-use ordinance?
This is a first step toward encouraging mixed use without having to jump through the conditional use hoops, a more onerous process. And we have not studied mixed use as a change in the overall ordinance that would require a great deal of rework in our code. And so this is a really good way of starting to allow for that and encourage it without having to go through an expensive, long process of a rewrite. Our code is based on a traditional Euclidean zoning, and where you have separation of uses and specific identification of uses, versus a form-based code, which doesn't deal with uses but deals with design and form. So if you were to develop a mixed-use code, it would take on more of a form-based code. And that, to develop a form-based code is a very expensive and long process to take our traditional code and rework it. There are ways to do hybrids, but again, that would be quite a lot of work. And in 1996, the city did an overhaul of the entire zoning regulations. And so we came up with a pretty good set of zoning codes in 96, and during the past, not quite 20 years, we've been tweaking them here and there, and this is a good first step.
And just to follow up, how many cities our size in the area use our process, the Euclidean versus the form-based?
Most communities do use the Euclidean traditional zoning approach. However, what we are seeing is they're becoming a hybrid of traditional and form-based, or they will apply a form-based code to a specific area, just like we did with the Woodland Station overlay.
Excellent.
Thank you. Euclidean comes from Euclid, Ohio.
That's right. It was a Supreme Court
the
case.
Not from ancient times,
Not from geometry.
Greeks or, yeah.
Or geometry.
So thank you. And I wanted Sally to make that clear, really, not just for my benefit, but for the benefit of the Planning Commission as well. I think Tom raised a valid point. Sally likes some flexibility, and I think we like to give it to her. You know, perhaps there ought to be some distinction between what we're talking about here and a larger project that would make some of us feel a little more comfortable that we are having the opportunity to look at that project and make a determination of whether or not it's something we want to approve. Will this come to the City Council next Thursday?
Next Thursday on first reading.
Okay. I am in favor of mixed use. Sally knows that. Wherever we can logically apply the concept. And so we've talked about doing things outside the DDA overlay. So with your explanation of, yes, this is a first step, I'll say I'm happy at this point. Thank you.
Seeing nobody else in the audience that would like to come forward, and we'll close the public comment section of this, and we will ask if there's any rebuttal from the applicant. Hearing none, we shall move on to the Planning Commission. Asking any final questions? If I don't hear anybody wanting to make any changes, then the next thing that would be appropriate is to hear somebody that would like to make a motion in a second, and then some discussion, and then we'll take a vote. Silence is dead.
I move we approve it as corrected.
Second.
It being ordinance number 1216, for the record.
Correct. Any discussion? We have a motion and a second, and we need to call the question.
Thank you. DeVoe,
No.
Watson,
Yes.
Mella,
Yes.
Probst,
No.
Rollinger,
No.
Stannard,
Yes.
and Vogel.
Yes.
Count them up.
It
1, 2,
passed.
3 noes
3-3.
and 4 yeses. Motion passes 4-3. This will move on to the City Council, first reading next Thursday, and then the public hearing on June 5th.
I don't see anything else on our agenda with the exception of reports. Okay, and I have none. Madam Director?
Thank you. I have just a few items. One thing is that on your desk is the monthly report from April. And a couple of noteworthy statistics is the building department during April had 201 inspections. We also issued 50 building permits. And since the beginning of the year, there has been construction value of over $16 million. Part of that value is driven by the apartments that are being built, as well as the new Tractor Supply Company broke ground this last month. So that's your monthly report of all the activity going on in the Planning and Building Department. I also am sad to report that we are losing one of our staff members. Deidre Arnold, our permit technician, is going to be moving to Denver. So you will see an advertisement come out in the Courier next week, and we will be hoping to have a replacement sometime in June. So we're sorry to see Deidre go. She was a great team member in addition to our department.
Can you find somebody as good as Amy?
We hope so.
Alone or chili sauce?
And then lastly, I wanted to just briefly have a discussion about attendance and notification of attendance. It, every week that we send out packets, Deidre would ask for confirmation of your attendance. What we would like to do for now on is that we're going to assume that you are here, going to be here. And if you are planning a trip or going to be gone, if you can tell us at least the 2 weeks ahead of time, like this night for the next meeting, then we will log that and know what our quorum is going to look like for the next meeting. Of course, if something comes up prior to the meeting and you're unable to, need to let us know within that 2-week period, do try to let us know as soon as possible so we can maintain a quorum. Will that work for everyone?
Yes.
Sure.
Can you send, I know you guys have sent this before, but I don't know if it's been email form. Can you send the meeting schedules through the end of the year to us?
You bet.
That'd be great. Just electronic copy would be
Some of those you
fantastic.
won't know. There's not a case, right?
Right.
Right, we won't know, but it, just
Yeah,
mark
but
your
it's
calendar
helpful.
for the second
Second
and
and
fourth Thursday. Now, that fourth Thursday in November and December lands typically on a holiday, but that is usually what we meet, that's our meetings.
Yeah, it's helpful
But we
to
can
have-
send it to
yeah.
you.
So our next one will be the 29th.
The next one, yes.
We'll come in on the fourth Thursday of Thanksgiving. She can bring turkey.
So, and I'm going to be making notes on the roll call so that they can get transferred to the next roll call sheet. That's going to be our system. So Jeff will be out. Okay. Okay. Anything else regarding?
I had one question on the dollar value of building permits. I'm just curious, I love numbers.
Yes.
If we've done 16 and change in the first 4 months, and I don't want to annualize that because I realize what's really driven that number, but in all the time you've been sitting in that chair, what's the biggest year we ever had? Just super round numbers. Have we ever done 100 in a year? Have we ever done 50? Just curious.
I don't have those numbers in my head. And it's only been since we've been starting to issue building permits that we've got the building permit evaluation.
True.
We did keep them for zoning development permits, but it wasn't something that was as clear and targeted as these numbers for building permits.
How's our numbers this year compared to a year ago?
For ZDPs or building permits?
Total amount, we got $16 million. Where were we a year ago? That'd be
John,
good-
I
that'd be- that'd be
don't
an
have
interest-
that number on the top of my head.
No, that'd be an interesting graph.
It would.
Just like we get the total sales tax
If you
revenue.
had it, I'd be stunned. Be worried about your.
I'm not like Tom with numbers, so.
It's big, John. 16 for 4 months.
That's huge.
Annualized would be roughly 50.
Yeah, but Tractor Supply is
Right,
in
that's
here,
it.
and that's
We know
gotta
that.
be
Well, and you've got Trail Ridge in there, but
And
But that's good.
enormous.
I
cares
can,
who it is?
I can tell you 16 is huge for 4 months.
It's just an interesting figure, like we look at sales tax
Yes.
overall for trending and all that stuff. Really great figure to see where our city's
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, after Walmart came online, remember years ago.
Yep,
And,
we'll tune into it more so.
It used to be taps for water until we started doing.
Right.
Till we didn't do any
Right.
for a year.
Is the tax the primary measure for impact of like Charis and all the other business? That's what we use to understand their impact on the community?
Yeah, sales tax is the driver for that influx of people into the community. We did add multifamily units in here, so you can see last year we had 4 buildings of Trail Ridge. Those permits were issued in November. And then this year we had 3 buildings of 24 each. So that's where the multifamily units. We've only sold 2 houses, taps for 2 houses.
What's interesting is that a friend of ours that comes in the office just rented Trail Ridge. He signed up. And a majority, or a substantial amount, of the units in Trail Ridge are already pre-rented.
It's like the big cities.
Pre-rented. And they go from $800 to $1,100 a month. Is what they do. It's not low-income housing. But there's a substantial amount of them. Very few one-bedrooms left. Time to go more. So that'd be very encouraging for the developer and for us.
Sure.
When are they gonna start the second phase, do you know?
Oh, they've started. We issued
They're building all of them.
all of them.
All of them?
Yes.
The first one will be occupied in July, I believe, and then every month scheduled until September. And that'll be the single bedroom.
Wow.
Whatever happened to Starbucks? I keep driving by there and see that.
Yeah,
It's not happening.
they're on coffee breaks.
Yeah. Last month, I was contacted by an architectural firm out of Phoenix They were looking at adding a second tenant so that there would be a larger footprint. They would be coming back through the amendment process. So apparently the land deal did not pan out or pencil
They didn't
out
come to
for them
terms.
with the one tenant. So they started looking for a second tenant.
Let's do this. Let's adjourn this meeting.
Yep.
And if we have some discussion afterward,
That would be
we
great.
certainly can do it. So,
Okay.
motion for adjournment.
So made.
All those in favor, signify by
Aye.
saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. She's going to stop that. Now, any other questions you want to ask Sally?